Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Welcome back to another episode of Naia Lax updates. How are we doing today, Tucker?
You're doing great. We are preparing for the season. There's a cat in the background. If you hear a cat or see a cat, that is Cat Attack. It is the official Naia Lax updates cat of the podcast. So there's some more energy and enthusiasm for the podcast. But rosters have dropped. The season grows closer. We are, I believe, we're within the same month of Naia lacrosse now. Reinhardt and some Southern teams getting the start here very soon. Needless to say, Naia lacrosse is back. It's right around the corner. We have a whole lot more information for you, a whole lot more insight. John, get us started with your kind of first tab there on our list for the day, because we got a lengthy one. I promise we won't rant as much as we normally do, but we do have some good insight nonetheless.
Yeah, the first thing I wanted to start today with was actually the breaking news that I think we got it yesterday, that Nate Allen, the All-American LSM from Lourdes, will be joining John Snow's new program at Coker College.
Mm-hmm. And that is that's an important development, not only with him leaving Lourdes and leaving the NAI, but it brings up the question of, will we see any more guys from the NAI go to Coker to try their talents at the D2 level with Coach Snow? I think that is to be determined. Obviously, we can't predict anything transfer-wise, as the NAI is not Division I, SEC, or Big Ten college football, so we can't give you that perfect insight. But nonetheless, I think that's an interesting development, simply on the idea of, our first kind of big NAI player this year going the D2 level down to Coker to take a visit and hang out with Coach Snow for a year or so.
Yeah, it's definitely a big loss for Lourdes and NAI in general. I mean, he was kind of one of those rising stars in the NAI ranks. And I think it leads to kind of the bigger. Is this something to keep an eye on, where more kids kind of, instead of transferring within the NAIA, will now look to join Snow at Coker?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think we will probably see it more, especially with the circumstances of the extra COVID year. We have guys now who are planning to play a fifth year, which is unusual, especially for NAI lacrosse. A lot of guys graduate in 4 years or so, and they're kind of off to their coaching or professional lives. And I think now, with the opportunity of players getting a fifth year, myself included, just having that extra insight and that extra opportunity and more to look forward to, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I think some of those players are considering joining Coach Snow down there, simply because of his legacy he leaves behind in the NAI, and his simple and pure coaching ability that can't go unnoticed. So I think again, we can't predict the future, but I think we may see it again. I think I'm most surprised seeing that starting out with Nate, and in particular a Lourdes player from the WAC. I think I would have seen that route probably started more with the AAC. I was expecting maybe more of a Southern Conference player to kind of join that team over there. So I'm a little bit surprised that it's Nate from Lourdes. But nonetheless, we wish him all the best of luck. Always wish Coach Snow and Coker the best of luck. But it's an interesting development and something that's new, because when you have a player, or when you have a coach it is that prolific in NAI lacrosse and really building a name for NAI lacrosse and Reinhardt lacrosse, leave the NAI to go Division II. There are different developments and impacts that we'll probably feel for several seasons because of that.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to say is it makes a little bit more sense if you really think about it, because I don't want to speak for Nate. I don't know that well, but my assumption, and I have no insider info on this, I haven't talked to anyone at Ryan. My assumption is he's probably someone who kind of considering coming to Reinhardt after playing them in the tournament. And then him being a younger guy, where how Queen transferred to Reinhardt, because Queen's a senior, where it makes more sense for him to try and win a championship this year than go to Snow and help Snow build something at Coker. It makes a little bit more sense with someone who's, I think Nate's only a sophomore, so going to Coker, trying to build something at the D2 level makes a little bit more sense.
That's a very, very good point right there. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree all the way. And you bring up a good point that any of these players that maybe were considering going to Reinhardt prior to Snow leaving and had communication with Snow, I would fully expect that Snow continued his communication with those players. I mean, who wouldn't? That's just what coaches should and do when they go to a different school. So I think that's probably what we're feeling and seeing in this move right here.
Yeah, definitely. And then moving right along back to the just focusing solely on the NAIA. Indiana Tech's roster dropped. Did you get a chance to take a look at that one?
I did shortly, and you filled me in even more so prior to the show, full disclosure. But it appears that Indiana Tech is as strong as they were last year, if not stronger. Again, I've talked about it 100 times. Their coaching staff, their school, they do an amazing job supporting lacrosse and building the program and continuing to make a presence felt in Indiana lacrosse and Midwest lacrosse in particular. So not too surprised that they're loaded up. There is also, I will leak the news here in some sense if nobody saw it. There is a transfer coming from Moval to Indiana Tech this year. He had left Moval, from my understanding, and was looking for another location to play, ended up at Indiana Tech. I believe personally, from knowing him and playing against him, he will make an impact on that team. That team, again, just grows stronger and stronger. So interesting piece that I noticed there. And there's a few other guys that you had noticed on that roster that will make pretty big impacts, and guys who have been there that will continue to make impacts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, starting off, you look at Andrew Ryan at attack right away. I mean, talk about player of the year candidate right off the bat. I mean, his goal last year, I think it was him who scored it against Cumberland's in the semifinals, one of the best goals of the season last year. Then you got the Bodley brothers. I know at least two of the three are back. I may have seen the third one. So hard to keep up with that roster. You got the Langio brothers, Sam Anderson at defense. And then this was a big addition. They got Josh Bramley, a Ganese JUCO attack transfer. And he wasn't one of these kids who was riding the bench down at JUCO. I mean, I think he had, I want to say 10 goals in the season. So, I mean, that's a quality player stepping up.
Very, very quality player. And yeah, Genesee is like, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. I know guys who have gone there, and I know a lot of guys that have gone there and then went to the D1 level and have done so very seamlessly. That's a program, from my understanding, that is scrimmaging Division I teams in the off season. It's a powerhouse JUCO, I believe, in New York, that continues to pump out incredible players. My comparison is that they are probably the comparable to the Onondaga of old. Onondaga obviously traditionally was a powerhouse. They're still a very good team, a very good JUCO. But I believe that Genesee has become what they were, and a place that players go to develop specifically as lacrosse players. So that's a huge pickup. Anybody who was on that roster and then going to the NAI level, I expect to make a pretty big impact. That's a player who's playing against traditional lacrosse hotbed talent. So very, very cool to see that. And that's actually, he's a player that I look forward to watching, simply because of his background and seeing how he pans out against other WAC teams, particularly.
Yeah, for sure. And that roster being just so stacked, I guess would be the word for it. It kind of reminds me of the Reinhardt roster from last year, where I don't want to say unbeatable, but you look at it and you're like, wow, this team would probably at least be my favorite right off the bat. Just a lot of fifth year guys and upperclassmen. I mean, should be a very big year for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, I personally, you see teams that are on the uptrend, you see teams that are on the downtrend, you see teams that are kind of stagnant in the middle. And I think Indiana Tech continues to go on an upward trend, continues to elevate NAI lacrosse. I have not checked their schedule. Are they playing any out of NAI games? Do you know? And I can pull that up here as we're talking about it. I'm curious to see that for one reason.
I don't know what their out of NAI schedule looks like off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up. I'm looking at it right here. I'm curious because when I think of teams making a big impact, and I mean this in a broad way, for most of the lacrosse community that is ignorant of NAI lacrosse or the playing level or talent in the NAI, the only way that they are able to measure NAI lacrosse in their minds is when NAI teams play traditional NCAA teams. And that's fine. If that's what it's going to take for people to understand NAI lacrosse, I'm all for it because it's a great measuring stick of that. That's why I'm curious if they're playing any out of NAI games. It doesn't look like they are this season. But it's always interesting to see any traditional NAI powerhouse teams match up against a good D3 or D2 team, because again, it does act as a great measuring stick for people ignorant of NAI lacrosse to understand. And that's the same for NAI sports across any sport. You see NAI teams go compete Division I basketball teams, and then people are aware of NAI basketball. Same thing we're feeling here in lacrosse when NAI teams go and play NCAA teams. A general audience then understands more about NAI lacrosse because it puts it on a spotlight. So was curious to see that they are not. They do have a very good schedule regardless. Lots of games, lots of very good teams all over the place. Very excited to see what Indiana Tech can do this year.
Yeah, for sure. And this is one of the things we ran a Twitter poll for. It was kind of should Indiana Tech be the number one team heading into the preseason? What is your opinion on this?
After seeing this roster, after seeing the schedule they're going to play, knowing where this program is going and the support it receives, yes. I think, and this is again, guys, we are not experts here. You are a former player. I'm a current player. We love NAI lacrosse. We can only see and understand what is in front of us. Right now, we're just going off of our hunch, what we feel like. I personally, just from the signs that we're seeing, think that Indiana Tech should be the number one going in right now. They have no reason to disprove that theory. They have shown us that in past seasons consistently, and they show us that with their roster that they have right now easily and then some. Obviously, after the first week of games, or really the first 2 weeks of games, we'll have a better understanding of exactly where they fall. But in the preseason, just going off of what we see, I would say yes.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you as well. The three choices I think I gave on the poll were yes, no, and then a third category, no, just simply because traditionally the way the NAI has done it is they've kind of let last year's champion remain number one. NFL. So I kind of tend to fall somewhere in between either yes or the no, but I think they're the clear favorites.
Yeah, looking at the poll here, it looked like 129 votes, 29% said yes, 47% said no, 24% said not to start but will win. And the not to start but will win, great category to put in there, because that's an interesting one. It almost seems like people believe in what they can accomplish, but they want to see them accomplish that first. So either way you combine those two, the majority does favor some success right there, which is very interesting. And I'm pulling up to last year's schedule here, kind of to reflect guys in this decision making and our way too early predictions / understanding. They went 18-2 last year. Most notable wins, 9-5 win over St. Ambrose. That was a really big win right there. I personally think the biggest statement win against any Midwest team came against Benedictine. Benedictine last year was a very good team again. I could tell you that from playing them myself. They were number 6 at the time. Indiana Tech beat them 20-3. That is a blowout against a top 10 team that is traditionally in the top 10. They were not just a floater. So that's a very big one. Obviously, one of their 2 losses coming to Reinhardt early and then Reinhardt later. The first was a regular season loss to Reinhardt, 11-10, very close game again. And then the last game of the year, which was their loss in the championship game, I believe, was 17-8. Reinhardt getting much more of an edge in that game there. But again, I think we see more consistency in the return from Indiana Tech and with the same coaching staff. Whereas again, I think Reinhardt is going to be a very good team. We don't know too much about exactly what's going to pan out there. But I do think it falls between these two teams right now.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that would probably, if I had to guess at why people just said no flat out, I would guess it would probably have something to do with Reinhardt.
Agreed. 100%. No, I think that makes the most sense. And that does seem to be, looking at the comments here, that does seem to be the same. It kind of reflects that. And I think it's extremely fair to say that I almost feel like it'd be comfortable to say that these two teams are tied for first in the preseason. That would be my most comfortable answer, I guess, in that question right there.
Yeah, I'd be pretty comfortable with that as well. And then I guess moving along, just sticking with kind of the theme of all the polls we ran pre-show. If you haven't seen them on Twitter, we kind of did more of a player focus, and that's kind of what we want to talk about a little bit today. We kind of did an offensive player of the year, defensive player, face-off specialist, and even a goalie category as well. So do you want to just start with the offensive player of the year and kind of read the results? We'll discuss
Yeah.
it a little bit.
So the first one, player of the year preseason, offensively speaking, um, Andrew Ryan, attackman for Indiana Tech, takes that poll with a 34% rating. Second to him was Haggart. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correct. He is an attackman at Aquinas. Those two were the two closest in the poll right there. Of the 139 posts, 139 votes, Ryan does take that with a 34%. And I will say, I also will, there's a comment I have along this as well that I've been thinking of.
Yeah.
Reading that poll there. I think one thing that people need to consider with these polls and consider with how offensive production is as a team is your best player is only going to be resulting in their true ability when your team can support them. I'm not saying you have to have a supporting cast. I'm saying that you have to have a supportive program, from the defensive side, making big stops, to a face-off guy getting a lot of face-off wins and bringing the ball to the offensive end, especially for an attackman. That results in more goals, more offensive production. I think Ryan at Indiana Tech is in a great position because Indiana Tech is well-rounded in all of those areas, and it offers great program support. I would argue the same could be said for Aquinas, traditionally being very rounded there. And then Doran at Columbia, I also kind of think that as well. All these teams listed with these players are teams that support their players. And you're seeing the result in these guys, their stats, their goals, their minutes played, everything. So I think there's a big portion to understand there that the best player on your team is only as good as the team behind them. And I think that's a big piece in all of this that people should understand as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess just thinking about those four guys, I think there's different reasons that each one makes it. I mean, if you look at Andrew Ryan, he's going to put up big numbers again this year. As we said, team might win the national title, definitely up there. I think the only thing that might hurt him a little bit is actually that his supporting cast is so dang good, where we went over it and they have probably 7, 8 guys on offense who I could see having 40 plus point type years.
Absolutely.
So one where his points might not compete with someone like Haggart, where if I had to put money on it, like if NAI gambling was a thing, probably put my money on someone like Haggart, just point wise being the highest, just because there was a stretch last year where I want to say he scored 8+ goals in like 3 or 4 games in a row. So that's just kind of the production we're talking about with someone like him.
Yeah.
And then the reason Bousquet is up there is obviously he's one of the captains at Reinhardt, but just knowing the way the offense is going to flow this year, he's probably going to have the ball on his stick almost as much as anybody else in the country this year.
That's a very good point. You brought up a great point there in oversaturation of talent compared to key players and the roles they play. Because you think of like the Division I level, you look at Syracuse or any major D1 team, their top 5 players for the most part are going to be pretty close in stats. And that one player that is steps above, that's going to be their name brand player, that guy may have 10 more goals than the guys right behind him. There's not as big of a gap in goal scoring. And I would agree. I think you see something very similar to that at Indiana Tech.
Yeah, for sure. Any final thoughts on that one before we move on to the defensive side?
No, I think that's good. I think that's a good start to the offensive side. Defensive player of the year, Popovich at Cumberland's takes that one with a 34% rating out of 154 total votes. Directly behind him and closest in margin would be Fisher Nuss of Reinhardt. Behind him would be Matt Wagner and Sam Anderson. One thing to reflect in this voting is that almost all of the votes were within 10% of each other. It was a very close one, and I think that's a strong example of what we can expect defensively speaking. And I think defense, and you can speak more to this than I can, obviously, but I think defensive players especially need support from the team. It makes their job hard when you have an offense that turns the ball over every single time and they're having to play way too many defensive reps and wear themselves down. So again, we see the same thing. To have a player stand out defensively, especially, they need people to maintain the ball and make sure that when the ball is coming back to them, it's quality time for them to make themselves defensively appealing.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say time of possession is the big thing when you're playing defense. I mean,
Yeah.
you're one of those teams that doesn't have someone who's good on faceoffs and the other team's getting the ball every time right after a goal. It can be a little bit frustrating. The one thing I will say about this one is this is probably the one I have the biggest opinion on, just because I've seen Fisher Nuss play so many times in person. And I gotta say, I'm trying not to be biased in this one. He is the best. He's the best goal I've seen in the NAIA like ever. And I mean, I know people are like, of course he's gonna say that, but I mean, I thought this when he was at Missouri Baptist. They played Kaiser one year at our field because I guess they were both in town playing us. He was probably a true freshman then, and I was like, this kid is amazing, and
Mhm.
kind of still feel that way now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think his talent shows, and he'll play a big role at Reinhardt again. Maybe if not even a bigger role, because now he steps into, I think, even bigger leadership expectations than prior, with a new coaching staff in particular that makes a big impact there. Special shout out to, and I don't know who this is, who dropped their video below with the comment, "Chip on my shoulder just got bigger. Appreciate you." I love to see that. I love to see that because, hey man, you're gonna work harder because of that. That's amazing. Also, way to drop your video in there. That's pretty sick. That's actually, I like that because that kind of speaks even more than just a comment. So extra special shout out to you. That's pretty cool to see. That's the kind of feedback I almost want to see right there. That's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And then moving along, do you want to start us off with the goalie one?
Yeah, let me go up here. Yep. All right, preseason goalers of the year. This was the most voted on of all the polls, which I love to see some goalie love. That's exciting. 256 votes in the final poll. And Sam Bowling of Concordia University, Ann Arbor, takes this one percentage-wise by a pretty large margin with 44% of the votes, nearly a 50% mark. That's pretty impressive right there. Directly followed by Tyler Queen of Reinhardt, and then Nolan Hayes of St. Ambrose. I can tell you right now, Nolan Hayes is a very good goalie. Played against him before. And then Clayton, oh, how I say his last name wrong.
Ryder, I think.
Bowrider. All right, I like that, of Aquinas. Personally, I think Sam Bowling and Tyler Queen, those two guys stick out in my mind right away, especially with the teams that they are on. I'm not saying we don't know what to expect from Aquinas, but there's a few moving parts there that we'll kind of see how they pan out. Obviously, having a new coach as well come into the NAI is a new thing. And then Nolan Hayes of Ambrose. I really think Nolan Hayes is a great goalie. I will be honest right there. I think Ambrose has a tradition of having really good goalies and having really good support for their goalies. So I will say the sleeper in this case that comes to my mind is Nolan Hayes. But I do think Tyler Queen and Sam Bowling make sense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And this was actually the one I had the hardest time kind of picking the player. There's so many good goalies on some of the top teams. I mean, one that people were looking for in particular is Pork Chop down at Cumberland's coming
Love the
back from
man.
the L. And the one thing I kind of talked privately with some of the Cumberland's players who were asking me why I didn't include him was partially just I know I've torn a ligament in my knee before, and like the first year after coming back from that, that's pretty hard, especially with something where goalie got to rely on quickness. And then also when he was out, I think the kid's last name is Tui, I want to say, the phenomenal sophomore. I mean, for a freshman last year to come in at the spot that he did, lead them to a national semifinal and almost make it to the championship. I mean, I think they lost in double overtime or something like that. It's going to be incredibly hard to, even if Pork Chop starts, I don't think you can go and say, Tua, you're playing 10% of the reps. Like,
That's a good
if I,
point.
he's getting at least 35% action time.
Yeah, that, you know, and the fun thing about goalies in lacrosse is I think goalies in my mind are the most comparable to quarterbacks in football. You only have one of them, and one guy could get injured, another guy goes in and is stellar. It's goalies, it's anyone's game in college lacrosse. And a lot of those goalies on teams like Cumberland's and on teams like Reinhardt and on teams like Indiana Tech, a lot of those goalies are so close to each other and they know each other so well that that much more competitive, which is some great inter competition there. I agree with you though. I think that'll be interesting to see. Obviously, high expectations of Pork Chop. The guy's epic. So excited to see there. I like the comment here coming in from Phil Jean, bringing up Vinny Jean of Siena Heights. I've seen video of Vinny playing before. Also very good goalie. And I think the reason I'm kind of guessing off of what you said, and if I were to put this poll together, it's tough. It's tough because so many of these teams have goalies that are so close in save percentage and so close in playing style and everything that it's so hard to see what goes on. I almost think the best test for goalies comes in the postseason, in conference tournaments and then national tournaments. I think that's when we really start to see goalies fall into themselves. And so I think that's a big area of how we see goalies come into place.
Yeah, for sure. And just speaking on Vinny particularly, I've been a big fan of that kid for years. I think he may have even been there when I was playing, maybe his freshman year. So he's been there quite a while. I think someone said his save percentage for his career is about 60%, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Being completely honest, the one thing I don't want to say I held it against him, but just unfortunately the way with COVID last year, his team only got to play in 5 games. So whereas he had, I think, 60 something percent saves, it was a much smaller sample size. So I kind of went with tiebreaker.
And shout out to Garrett Moore putting his name in the hat from Multnomah. Love to see that. Looking forward to seeing you play and the rest of your program get the start in the NAI this year. So special shout out to you and the boys in Oregon there. Very, very cool to see. Love the comments coming in on this poll in particular. A lot of really good comments. And that's what we like to see. I like to see people bring up good points like that and everything like that. But I think that was an awesome poll. I really do. I think that was an awesome poll.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite one. Just as you said, all the comments for that one. And that leads us to the last one, the face-off specialist.
Yeah. Face-off specialists. We love you guys. You're the glue to every team, and you're also the craziest on the team, most likely, to be honest with you. All right. 101 votes here. This, in full disclosure, in my opinion, preseason on face-offs is one of the hardest things to look at because face-off guys are impacted by a lot of factors, and they're most heavily impacted by their competition and new players that come in they're going against. They are in the spotlight from the second that whistle blows. So we'll be able to see where the face-off guys fall probably after week 1. In this poll, JR Sess of Reinhardt taking it 44%. Again, another 44% ranking. That is pretty high. Directly followed by Kyle, gonna say his last name wrong, Gassior.
That sounds good enough for me.
And I remember seeing Kyle play just on the streams too. Great face-off guy and makes a big name for Tennessee Wesleyan on the face-off because that makes that whole team that much better as well, which is great. In the back of my mind, I feel like Tennessee Wesleyan is another team that's always had pretty good face-off guys. I remember every time I've watched them play, even when I was a recruit, watching them play against teams that I was getting recruited by, they always had good face-off guys. So that's a good follow-up there. And then Cam Province of Kaiser coming in at 15%, and Zach Stahura, gosh, I hope I'm saying the name correct, coming out of LU. What LU is that?
That's Lords.
Lords, okay. I think I might have played against Zach. Do we know what year Zach is?
Off the top of my head, I think he's a senior, maybe a fifth year even.
I will have a story here real quickly if this is the same kid. I'm going to look his picture up real quick. I got a good story if this is the same guy.
Yeah, for sure. While he looks that up, I want to make a couple comments on this one. This is one of the most interesting ones where just the sheer volume of players actually returning. I mean, Provines was first team All-American last year. Gassier and Sess were both co-second team All-Americans last year. So having 3 of the top 4 guys back made that one incredibly difficult.
And this is interesting. This is actually okay. So Zach is not the player I was thinking of. Lords, again, always had really good face-off guys. My freshman year, we played Lords up here in a snow game in a bubble, and they had a killer face-off guy. And then I think Zach was also splitting reps maybe at this point, if I'm correct. No, take that back. Zach was not on the team the year that I played them. Interesting. They've always had really good face-off guys. And I think the most interesting thing that comes to mind right now, looking at Zach that I did not know, he is a Missouri Valley transfer. That I did not know. Looks like he was at Missouri Valley in 2017 when the team advanced to the national semifinals. Didn't know that. And then 2018 stepped away from lacrosse, and then 2019 joins Lords, and then 2020 he did not play any games, and then 2021 is when he really started to pop off at Lords. That's an interesting background. I actually didn't know that. Again, interesting to know that he was on the Missouri Valley of old, the powerhouse team that year. Very interesting note.
Yeah, and that kind of leads perfectly into kind of our Twitter segment of questions people had asked and what we've kind of seen people discussing. And one of the things I've been discussing with people the past couple of days, and people brought up to me in my messages, were where would Missouri Valley be if they even had like 50, 60% of all the transfers? I mean, it seems like anytime we're going over a roster, it's, oh, look, another Missouri Valley kid on that one.
I think they have been most impacted by transfers this year, if not in NAI lacrosse history, just as a program. I mean, it really developed into a different program because of how many guys have transferred and have gone different ways. We have a Missouri Valley transfer here at Clarke. Shout out to Justice. There's a lot of guys that were in that route. And that's an interesting point. And I think personally, my freshman year, we played Missouri Valley. Barnes was on the team at that point. I was a freshman playing attack here at Clarke. Missouri Valley was still a very good team. They started to look like a little bit different team. And I think Barnes would probably tell you that too. That was kind of the year that things started to shift a little bit. And I think that's when a little bit of coaching uncertainty also kicked in. We started to see different coaches in that 2018-19 season there. I think if they were going into this season with 50% of the transfers that they recently lost under Hines as a coach, I think that they would be, I don't know if I could say top 4, but I would say maybe top 5 of the KCAC. And that's including the fact that KCAC has grown by numerous teams since they had all those transfers in their team. I mean, I even look at Missouri Valley where they were last year when I played against them. I blew out my hamstring early on in that game, but I remember standing on the sideline watching that team thinking, man, this is still a really good team with a lot of support from the school. So I think even with the players they had last year that are not there anymore, they would be in a very good spot, adding a few guys even better. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess if we just go off of last year's team who they lost, I don't know. Like, I think they would definitely be in the upper part of the KCAC. But I mean, if you just go back like 3 years and just say, hey, 50, 60% back, I think we're talking about at least a receiving votes team, top 15-ish. I mean, I don't think that's out of the question. And then I think if you somehow get all of them back, I think you're definitely looking at probably a top 8 team.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree. And this is especially, guys, no slander to you, Missouri Valley boys. I got a special affection for all of you. Many of you are close friends, and Hines being a great friend and a teammate of mine. Um, I know that they are in a numbers spot right now, that things are down. I have no doubt that Hines will bring that back up and the program will get that much better again. But I think it is a very fair question to ask of where would they be right now if things were a little bit different? Where would they be if so many guys weren't at Reinhardt or around the country? Again, I think these are interesting lacrosse studies within the NAI because they're questions to ask that do impact the game in a huge way.
Yeah, for sure. And this one's a little bit more fun. Someone was talking about, I saw, what if lacrosse relegation was a thing? And anybody who doesn't know what like relegation is, it's something that's more popular kind of in European soccer, where like, say you're at the Premier League, if you know anything about soccer, that's the highest in England. If you come in like the bottom four, you get demoted to the next league, and then the same happens again, you get demoted, and then if you finish in the top half of lower division, top couple spots, you get promoted. So someone tweeted out like, well, what would that be like? And I think that would just be it'd be chaotic, but it'd be pretty interesting for the sport as a whole.
I think we would need more NAI lacrosse media aside from us involved in that process. But I think it would be interesting. And I think there's actually probably a serious point to look at here. For example, those who don't know, NAI basketball has Division I and Division II. They are competing for two separate national championships, both bringing in a lot of talent basketball wise, but it's normally based on roster depth and talent size, from what I can tell, and less of school size. Whereas in Division I sports and Division II sports and Division III, a lot of the time the schools are differentiated based on campus size, school size, enrollment. I think, though, and this is way out there, and I only hope our game gets to this point, I think 10 years from now, maybe even 5 or 7 years from now, if we continue on the growth that we are at right now in NAI lacrosse, we very much could see ourselves in the same boat as other NAI sports where you have Division I and Division II. Again, that's just a thought. We would need a whole lot more guys going NAI. We would probably need, I think it would be fair to say we would need nearly double the amount of teams to pull that off. But that's an interesting point, that relegation and differences in division and playing level that's a very real thing.
Yeah, I kind of jokingly said, well, half joking, I must admit that there'd end up being a lot of someone like the very low D2 and D3 teams who kind of chirp the NAIA teams and the club teams when they play them, and they end up losing bad. They'd quickly find themselves at the bottom of the MCLA.
I think we especially see that a lot with the D3 teams, especially here in the Midwest. Not to say there's some really good Midwest Division III teams, but there's a lot of Midwest D3 teams that are just scraping by, that play NAI teams, and NAI teams roll them. I think we see that a lot, especially in Midwestern lacrosse. So that's a pretty good comment, actually.
Yeah, for sure. One other one I saw on Twitter particularly was someone sent in, what teams are in win now scenarios?
Win now in the sense that they could play tomorrow and be in a very good spot.
Can you repeat that?
Does that one refer to win now in the sense that those teams could go play tomorrow against a good team and do well?
Yeah, like who would win? My interpretation of it was who's in win now mode as kind of like this is our year. We have a lot of seniors. We got to get it done today. Or I don't want to say the ship sailed, but like it gets harder if we don't get it done now.
Ooh, shoot. Now that one takes some thinking. What are the teams that come to your mind?
I think the two off the top of my mind would probably, and this is an interesting one because part of me thinks they are in win now mode, would be Indiana Tech, just because they are so senior and fifth year late in this year. But also they have so much young talent that they're kind of not in that category. But I do think this is kind of the year where if I saw them doing it, I think it'd be this one. Another one might be Cumberland's. I have to go back and look at the the numbers, but it feels like this was one of their deeper classes, was the senior one, and then I think they have a lot of freshmen as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's a big deal that I don't think people realize that makes as big of an impact on teams. You could have a team one year that is maybe even 50% seniors, but that 50% is your entire starting lineup. If those guys graduate and you have a totally different look, that's a different team. That's a different team. That's different results. That's a different playing style. That takes some time to mesh as a program. Um, and I think those programs that are in win now mode and that are senior heavy, they have to know they're doing that much more recruiting in the offseason. And I would even say less recruiting of incoming freshmen and more recruiting of strong transfer players, because you do want to replace some senior type leadership. You want to replace some guys with playing experience, because the simple fact is a freshman stepping on a field the first year is going to have a completely different experience than a junior who's played 2 to 3 years of college lacrosse prior. They're different expectations.
Yeah, definitely 100% agree with you on that one. One other one I saw off Twitter. This is the last one that I got personally. It was a parent reaching out saying their son was getting recruited to Benedictine, and just kind of any thoughts on that program as a whole. I figured I'd defer to you for this one.
Yeah, I actually, you know what? I know a lot of guys who have gone through Benedictine's program. I run into a lot of them in the box season now. I think they're great guys that come out of there. I think I would say I would go even further than a well-rounded program and say they're a well-rounded school. My experience playing against Benedictine, both home and away being Atchison, Kansas, at Benedictine, they've always been great. They're class act guys. They're class act coaches. They know their lacrosse. The biggest thing that comes to my mind is they're recruiting guys who are lacrosse IQ guys. They're high tempo, enjoyable to watch. I particularly, and I said this with one of the harder venues to play at, I think that their campus embraces lacrosse more than most campuses do. Their women's program is phenomenal. They just had the women's national player of the year last year, Natalie. Their women's program is incredibly strong. Their men's program has always been strong. Even being a guy in conference, you could say in a rival type program, plays against them. I have to give that program all the respect in the world. I don't care what coaching changes have happened. I don't care what it is. I know that they will always be a very competitive program and they will always get good recruits. I think they recruit well across the country, not just Midwest regionally. And they make a very good look for college lacrosse in Kansas, because whenever I'm traveling or going to youth tournaments or even playing in box, if I bring up NAI lacrosse, one of the top 3 teams mentioned is always Benedictine, even for people who don't know about NAI lacrosse. And a big portion of that is because every year Benedictine's men's and women's program plays against Rockhurst, a very good Division II program in Kansas City, I believe. Historically very competitive. I think the women's team might have beat Rockhurst last year. Again, that shows the Division II, high-level Division II spotlight against NAI teams. I think they do a great job with that. Overall, my opinion of Benedictine, all the respect in the world to those guys. Great program, great group of guys. Can't say enough good things, and I'm not playing favorites because I play in this conference against those guys.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. One other thing I'll add is I believe they have their own sports network, kind of similar to how Cumberland's has. So they always do a good job on the broadcast as well. So if you're not a state person, can't be there in person to watch your son or daughter play, you'll probably have a very good chance of seeing all these.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That goes a long way when you can have somebody broadcasting a game who knows lacrosse. That's few and far between, I would say, especially in the KCAC. The 2 teams that I feel like do an absolute stellar job are Columbia and Benedictine. Both of those teams are in what could be considered non-traditional lacrosse areas. While Missouri has really good lacrosse in some areas, it's still pretty few and far between. Kansas, even more so. So the fact that they're getting guys in there and people in there who want to broadcast lacrosse and do a great job at it, I'm going to be honest with you, Benedictine even has radio spots going on field prior to games. So I enjoy always going into games at Benedictine because you're really getting a very high class collegiate athlete experience.
That's a great point as well. Any other questions that you saw asked?
Oh boy, I don't think I had any. Are there any that you saw or think of that have been swirling around your head prior to this, or even with recent news that we've been seeing?
Um, I
I will
guess
add. I can add one before, not to interrupt you. Um, I think Madonna was kind of a question for a few weeks here. We didn't know what to look at Madonna. We didn't know exactly what the program would look like. I'm seeing what's coming out of Madonna. I've seen practice pictures. I saw their little stats going on between players here and how many players were doing things. I'm impressed with the numbers and participation and media coming out of Madonna. So I'm excited to see that from Madonna again. That was one thing that was going around my mind.
Yeah, and speaking of Madonna, I think two of the names I saw, I think they posted like a wall challenge, and they had some pretty good stick work times on those.
Mhm.
And I think I saw that Olgin Gel's there again, and Ian Rush is back as well. The one name I didn't see on there listed, and I know he was talking about whether or not you could get another year of eligibility because I think he got hurt, was Dyson.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. That didn't cross my mind. That's a good, very, very good point, actually. Yeah. I can also go back real quickly and kind of retract my comment about Indiana Tech not playing any NAI out of NAI games. I didn't see this in their schedule until I looked at their graphic just now. At the end of this month, actually, in January 29th, they take on Davenport University. Davenport was an NAI school for a long time. They had a ton of Canadians on the team. From my understanding, two of those guys who were on that NAI Davenport team are current NLL players. Very interesting piece there. They, as a university, have gone between, they were Division II, then they went NAI for a short time, and in that process, they were MCLA for a year. And recently, in the past 3 years, I believe they have gone back to being full-time members Division II. So Indiana Tech does take on Davenport, which is a Division II program out of Michigan that a lot of people know about. Curious and excited to see Indiana Tech take on Davenport there.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. For those of you who don't know, Davenport actually went one and done in the NAI. They won the national title year one of NAI and then dipped out to D2, I think.
It left
So,
on top, I guess. Like, yeah.
yeah, I guess I don't want to say happy to see them go as like a fan of the game, but from a Reinhardt perspective, it was one less top team.
Yeah. There was one that I think we can bring up real quickly here, just to, we'll make sure to give you guys your full ticket price of this show. John Barnes, Ryan Barnes' dad, John, shout out to you, is a walking lacrosse encyclopedia. Love the conversations that guy has. There was a great point brought up a while back between you and him and about eligibility within the NAI. And I think this is one that a lot of people don't know about and is very, very gray area, but important to bring up to you guys who are current NAI players, parents, anybody involved in it. If you are interested in eligibility in the NAI, it is very, very important to research your conference eligibility and how your conference works with that. Every conference in the NAI handles eligibility, from my understanding, significantly different. For example, in the KCAC, if you transfer from an in-conference school, you have to sit out that entire next season. And that's huge because a lot of guys then have to stay a fifth year, or they're making the move for academic reasons closer to home. It makes it a little bit more challenging because you're transferring in conference. I know I have seen players go through that eligibility issue and try to understand how long they have to sit out. If you are interested in that, it's important to really dive into the details of that before making any decisions, I would say, because there's a lot of gray area that I've seen in the KCAC that some people kind of are able to slip by or find ways to work with people on. And there's other people that just get forgotten about and don't end up playing lacrosse because of that. And I know, especially in the NAI, that is very, very different per conference. I'm not even sure how it is in the AAC. I've heard it's very different than that.
Man, transfer rules are so confusing. I wish it was almost just I don't want to say better regulated, but I kind of do want to say better regulated, just kind of one for all for one.
Hmm.
But my biggest advice is if you're thinking about transfer out of conference. Like I know it can be a bit of a pain with kind of moving different states, but like if you're in Kansas, move to Tennessee. Don't
Yeah.
don't Kansas. If you're in Tennessee, move to the WAC. Stuff
Yeah.
like that. It's just a shame, and I don't even think a lot of the coaches fully understand of it. So
Agreed.
I don't think they mean to get kids into bad situations, but I can think of a couple off the top of my head where kids have transferred with the understanding that yeah, I'm good to go. It's in conference, but I got the coach here said it's good, and then right before the season, oh, it's not so good now.
Yeah, it's so tough. And you've seen it, I've seen it. You see a lot of guys who are so talented just get burnt out in the process, which you really hate to see. I mean, the biggest thing that comes to mind is whether people know it or not, you can only play lacrosse for so long. And your college eligibility is a ticking clock from the second you step on the field. In a lot of cases, the second you step on a campus and you're enrolled as a student. Um, it's important to understand these things. Most, if not all, NAI schools have a designated eligibility compliance officer. That a lot of the times is an assistant coach, and another team is your assistant AD. It's extremely important to be transparent with those people. If you are at all curious about your transfer eligibility, your playing eligibility, whatever it may be, if you're upfront and ahead with those people, they are going to make your life a whole lot more simple and a whole lot more easy. But because we don't really have a transfer portal, which I only hope we can one day have a transfer portal to understand this and make it a lot more transparent. As it is right now, it is kind of muddied water, and you got to do your research. It's crazy how it all works. I highly suggest if you ever have any questions on it, reach out to somebody who knows a lot more than we do.
Yeah, I get those a lot. I transfer here. I'm like, I don't even want to touch this. Like, I don't want to pretend I got the answer on this one or not.
Yeah, gosh, I'd love to answer it more fully, but I really, and again, in a lot of cases, from my understanding, a lot of conferences treat it as the second you're enrolled as a student in a university full time, not even playing a game. I know in the NAI, the way traditionally, from my understanding, it's worked is as soon as you're enrolled as a full time student at that university, you're counted as playing there. Like that is in their mind, you are a student there. If you transfer to anywhere else, you're on that campus. You have to wait a full number of days until you can even participate in a practice on another campus. So find it out, do your research, watch some YouTube videos. I don't know, understand it more. I would even say go outside of lacrosse, go to a sport where maybe like football or somebody who deals with these transfer eligibility a lot more. Because they deal with it probably on a weekly basis compared to NAI. It's like yearly or it pops up every now and then. Just be upfront. That's the biggest thing. My last kind of comment here spawns off of a tweet I had. This again is, guys, no disrespect to any of you out there. We love you guys. We love all you in the NAI lacrosse world. We're one big army. We have to work together. If we don't work together, then we fall together. But the thing that comes to my mind here, guys, is, and this isn't even off of Twitter related content. This isn't off of anything. This is more or less communicating with people in the off season around different NAI teams all over the place. Guys, don't take a big old dump on the NAI. Even if you've had issues with it or whatever it may be, don't paint it in a bad manner to everybody else. Everybody's going to have a different experience. The more positivity that we can put out there, the more programs we're going to see grow. The more media we can put out there, the more content we can put out there, the more teams will pop up, the more people will understand NAI lacrosse. We're at a point right now that is so crucial to the development of the game, to NAI lacrosse, that the more recognition we can give to our sport and to NAI in particular, the more growth we'll see, the more kids we'll see getting into college, the more people we'll see playing college lacrosse, the more positive impacts we'll see from everything that goes around there, guys. So all of us, it's on all of us to paint a good picture for the NAI and to be honest with people. And if there were ever any issues, be transparent with people about that. Every level of college sports you're gonna have your issue. They're all time commitments. They're all different levels. They're all different coaches. They're all different institutions. But the more positivity we can put out there, the more love for the community we can put out there, the better this all goes around. I have loved the constructive criticism you guys have been getting us. I've loved the comments you've been giving us. You guys, you fuel the show. You fuel what we do here. We can tell through those comments that you guys love NAI lacrosse as much as we do. If we could all get together in a non-COVID world and have one big NAI lacrosse party and convention, trust me, we would, because you guys are all part of this family. And that's my thought. I think the more positivity we put out there, the more love we show for each other, the more this game continues to grow.
And I think perfect way to wrap it up right there.
I like it. I like it. Well, hopefully you guys are staying well, staying healthy. A lot of you are preparing in this month to play your first games. I can tell you right now, we both look forward to it. We start practices here at Clarke on Tuesday. Lacrosse is back in the air, folks. Man, it is an addicting feeling. We're pumped for it. I know you're excited to see some NAI lacrosse.
Oh, for sure. For sure. We'll see you next time, guys.
See ya.